How's everybody doing? It is good to be back. I heard good things. John's done a fantastic job. Why don't you give it up for John for doing a great job for us while he's gone? It was just really great to get away. My wife and I went up to the New England area, had a wonderful vacation up there, ate a lot of lobster, and we did a lot of hiking and really enjoyed the New England coastline. It's absolutely drop-dead gorgeous up there. But it's always good to go, but it's always good to come home. And it's just really great to be back with our church family. And I don't know if you heard about the guy that was on vacation, and he's driving down the road. This rabbit runs out in front of him, and unfortunately hits it with his car, and it's not me, okay? And so he's driving along, and this rabbit hits this rabbit, and this guy's a very sensitive guy, and he's an animal lover, so he decides to pull off the road and just to see if he could help the rabbit. And so he pulls off the road, and to his dismay, the rabbit is dead. So he's a very sensitive guy. He's standing by the side of the road, outside of his car, and he's crying. And so this lady is driving down the road, and she sees this guy crying, so she pulls over the road and says, "Man, what's going on?" He said, "Why, I feel so terrible, man. This rabbit jumped out in front of my car, and I hit him, and I killed him." And the woman said, "Man, don't worry, man. I know exactly what to do." And so she went to her car, and she opened up the trunk and pulled out a spray can, and she walked over and picked up the dead rabbit and sprayed this stuff on him. And all of a sudden, miraculously, this rabbit came back to life, jumped up, waved at the two people, jumped down went down the road about 50 feet, turned around, waved again, and then just before he disappears into the woods, he turns around and waves again. And so the guy is like freaking out, and he says, "Man, what in the world did you spray on that rabbit?" And so she holds up the spray can, and on the spray can it says this: "Hairspray restores life to dead hair and adds permanent wave." Hey guys, I'm back, corny jokes and all, I tried to find the lamest joke this morning just to mess with you guys. So anyway, hey, this week I'm starting a brand new series on honor. And I will tell you something, it is a message that's been burning in my heart for a long time. We actually intended on sharing it last summer, and then I got sick, so I decided I'm going to take this month and share it. And really, as I look at our culture, we've really lost the meaning of honor. I think we live in a generation that is very cool to criticize. It's cool to speak out against. It's cool to blog about it, Facebook about it, tweet about it, verbalize. We have become a culture that is very quick to criticize. And today I really want to kind of lay the groundwork of where we're going in the next couple weeks. And next week we're going to be looking at the things that the Bible tells us and encourages us to honor and respect. And I'm sure all of us are going to be able to see a few areas that we can identify that we need some improvement on. And then the following week, we're going to really get very practical, and that'll be kind of a fun week. We'll look at how we can practically walk that out. But today, hopefully, this will be a challenging and provoking message that will hopefully step on all our toes a little and really see some areas that we need to improve on. And in my opinion, we need to get back to some old school. And it's time for guys to begin to treat the ladies with some honor and respect. It's time for guys to begin to open the doors for the ladies, to pull their chair out at the dinner table. And I'll tell you, I'm just going to share a couple pet peeves with me. It drives me crazy. I'm a people watcher, and being, traveling and, going into an airport, it bugs me. And one bugs me to know, drives me crazy, man. I'll see a couple walking through the airport, and it's a guy and girl, I don't know if they're married or just together, and I see the guy with his light computer bag on. He's carrying his phone and texting, and his wife or girlfriend is struggling with the luggage. I'm like wanting to smack the guy upside the head, man. It's like, what's up with you, dude? And can I hear an amen from the ladies here? Okay? I'm your pastor. I'm your friend, okay? I'm trying to help you out here. And some guys will just say, you know what? They don't want to be treated that way anymore. I beg to differ, man. They have been forced into a place to make up where we lack. They have been forced in a place where they don't actually really want to be. And another area that really, I'm just sharing it, man. We need to honor our flag. I mean, it bothers me to go to a sporting event and, they go to sing the national anthem and people are just taking it so casual. And I read an article here a couple weeks ago. Maybe you read the same article where This gentleman, I believe is in California, he lived at this apartment complex, and he's flying the American flag outside of his apartment complex. And don't hear that I don't want Muslims or anybody to live in our country. I'm not going, that's not where I'm at here. He had a Muslim neighbor that went to the management and complained that he was offended because his neighbor was flying the American flag. So the apartment complex goes to this guy and forces him to take it down because it offended his neighbor. And you know what? This is where I'm at, man. If you don't love our country, if you can't honor our flag, for the flag that represents the freedom that was purchased with the military men and women, you hear what I'm saying? Go home. Go back to where you came from, and don't let the door hit you in the butt as you exit. And as far as the apartment complex manager, I'm not trying to be rude here or crude. They need to grow a pair and stand up for what is right. You hear what I'm saying? It is time that we get to a place of honor. It's time that it needs to come back to life in our culture. Because I really believe that as we honor those things that God desires for us to honor, as we honor those things, we're honoring God. And we're going to see that in the Bible. Can you imagine, families, what it would look like if we learned to honor each other? How about parents? What would it look like if your children honored and respected you? Parents, what would it look like if you honored and respected your children the way that God wants you to respect them? What would it look like on our jobs if there was a noticeable difference in how we treated people? And people would sit up and take notice and say, man, I can't figure that person out, but man, they are such a wonderful person because they're showing honor to people around them. And this is so important for us to get. And I want to look at an example in the Bible of how Jesus was actually limited in what he was able to do, because the people in his own hometown, the people who should have actually honored him the most, honored him the least. And I want to give you the background of Mark chapter 6. Jesus was returning to his hometown, not his birthplace, but to the place where he grew up. And a year actually prior to that, he was actually run out of town, and his own people threatened to kill him. So he comes back after this kind of we call it like a teaching tour, where he went across the country teaching people God's word and doing all these miracles. So he turned water into wine, and he raised the dead, and he opened up the eyes of the blind, and he prayed for people that were deaf, and they were able to hear again. He multiplied loaves of bread and fish. He even healed Peter's mother-in-law, which many scholars believe that's why Peter later on denied him. I know, bad joke, okay? I told you I'm back, okay? But he was doing all these miracles, and then he come back to his hometown, and he actually couldn't do as much as he was doing in the other area because there was a lack of honor and faith. Mark chapter 6, it reads this: Jesus left there and went to his hometown, accompanied by his disciples. And when the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. Where did the man get these things, they asked. What's the wisdom that has been given him? What are these remarkable miracles he's performing? In other words, man, wow, this guy's amazing, man. Powerful teaching. Look at all these miracles. How can he do all these things? And then someone spoke up and said this: isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son, the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. In other words, they're saying, man, isn't this the ordinary guy that just grew up around the corner? Man, I remember him, man. When he was in school, man, he was the teacher's pet. He was the one that never got in trouble. He was the one that aced all his tests. Isn't he the guy that later on became a carpenter? Didn't he build our kitchen table? Isn't he just that ordinary guy that grew up around the corner? Then in verse 4, it says this: Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home. I'm going to give you two things that causes dishonor. And the Greek word, translate where it says with honor, it means to dishonor, to treat as common or ordinary. And so here's number one: to treat as common or ordinary causes dishonor. If you want a common or ordinary marriage, let me tell you how to get one. I promise you, if you want a common or ordinary marriage, dishonor your spouse. Treat them as common or ordinary. Why is it in the early years, man, like in the dating stages, man, I mean, it's just everything is wonderful. Man, why? Because we continue to show honor, man. The guys are opening doors for the girls and giving each other gifts, and there's not even an occasion to give a gift, and guys are sending flowers, and we're showing honor over and over again. What happens many times is we get married, and we begin to take one another for granted. You begin to, instead of showing honor, you begin to treat as common. And suddenly what was great becomes common and ordinary now. Why? Because you show dishonor. The flip side of dishonor is the word honor. It means to value, to respect, or highly esteem. It means to treat as precious, weighty, or valuable. It's to ascribe worth, esteem, and value. I'll just kind of give you an example. I have a football that otherwise would be common or ordinary football. But it's valuable to me because the greatest running back in the NFL history, Jim Brown, signed it. And the ordinary ball is now extraordinary to me because his name's on it, because I ascribe value to his name. I would never treat that ball as ordinary or common. I've got other ordinary and common footballs at my house. When my grandkids come over, many times we'll get out in the front yard or go to a park and we'll throw the football. Sometimes at my house, I'll actually forget about it and leave it in the bushes overnight. Or my dog begins to chew on it, and it's no big deal. But this one football, with Jim Brown's name on it, you'll never see me tossing around. I would never treat it as common or ordinary. What does honoring do? Honor esteems, it lifts up. Dishonoring devalues and tears down. To honor someone is to believe the best in them. To dishonor is to believe the worst. Honor lifts up. Dishonor tears down. Watch what the spirit of dishonor does to the Son of God here. Check this out. A prophet in his own town is without honor. The very next verse says this in verses 5 and 6. Jesus could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their lack of faith. Now check this out. It doesn't say he wouldn't. It doesn't say Jesus would not. The Bible says he could not do miracles except lay hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed. He said, wow, man, he couldn't believe their lack of faith. And I don't fully understand it, but where there was a lack of faith, there was a lack of honor. And where there's a lack of honor, a lack of faith, Jesus could not do what he could do in other areas where there's honor and faith. And tragically, we have become a generation that knows no honor. And here's the second one is this. Offenses causes dishonor. Offenses causes dishonor. It says they were offended by him. You cannot honor that which offends you. If you're offended by the government, you know what? You're going to go to a place where God doesn't want you to go. And I'm not saying you have to agree with everything. I'll be honest with you. Right now, there's some things that our government is doing that I do not agree with. But I still need to respect the authority that God has placed in our lives. Romans 13 says, all authority, not some, all authority under heaven has been given by God. You treat it with the same level of respect. You can't disagree. You can be disagreeable, I'm saying. You can be disagreeable and respectful at the same time. If you are offended by your parents, and maybe some of you grew up and you've had a horrible childhood. Your parents haven't been the best. And I hear people say, you know what, man, you don't know my story. I'm not saying you have to obey your parents, but you do have to honor them. And we'll be developing this thought as we go through this series. But the Bible says, children, obey your parents. Now, most of us here in this room, man, we're on our own. So you know what? We don't have to necessarily listen to our parents, but we're all under this one. We are to honor and show respect to them. You may say, well, what does honor mean? Well, it means to give a level of respect, not to take lightly. And when we do that, it changes everything. So the question is, well, how do we set up our heart? How do we set our hearts up to honor? And I'll give you three things. Number one is honoring begins with God's claim on them. It has nothing to do with what they deserve. So whether person's Republican or Democrat or good parents or bad parents. Honoring doesn't begin with your assessment of them. Honoring begins with how God views them. So the question comes into play then, how does God view them? He views them as someone he created, that he loves, and that he died for. You will never meet a person that God doesn't love. You will never meet a person that Jesus did not die for. Saved or lost, they are his creation, and he loves them. And as soon as you really begin to understand that, and you move from this, they deserved mentality. They don't deserve my honor. They cut me off in traffic and shot me a bird. They don't deserve this because they did this or that in my life. When we move from based on, what they deserve and based on God's claim, it changes everything. Ephesians 5:21 says this, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Why? Because they deserve it or honor? No, out of reverence for Christ. We are treating people based on my view of him, not on my view of them. You follow me? If we get this, I want to tell you something. It will change your life if you can get a hold of this principle. Jesus himself told us as believers that we will stand before God, and he's going to say, man, he's going to judge us according to what we've done to the least of these. And it kind of goes both ways, man. We feed people every Friday, the needy among us in our community. We have 200 families that come out here, and we give them meat, fresh vegetables, and food every single week. And every, bag that we give to that person is like giving it to Jesus. When we're out there in 2 weeks passing out those backpacks to Bayshore Elementary School, when we're out there next month ministering to teachers at Daughtry Elementary School, doing a breakfast for them, we're doing it as unto Jesus. However, the flip side of that is when we're stabbing somebody in the back, talking nasty behind their back, calling them a jerk, we're calling God a jerk. You say, man, I'd never call God a jerk. I'm telling you what Jesus is telling us here today. This isn't Stan Pavkovich. This is what Jesus tells us. As we do it to the least of them, we do it to him. And I'm just challenging you, church. I want to call you to a place of honor as individuals and as a church. And I know we're going against the grain of culture, but we need to do it based on the love of God, based on the reverence of God. Here's the second thing. Are you guys with me out there? Okay, here's the second one. Honoring benefits us. The Bible gives us that as a motivation, and we should do it whether, I hate to sometimes talk about how it benefits us because I don't want that to truly be our motivation. But it's through the Bible that we should do it because it's the right thing to do, because God instructs us to do it. But through the Bible, it tells us that we benefit when we honor those around us. Just to give you an example, Ephesians 6:2-3 says this, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. When you honor people, it benefits you too. That's what Jesus was showing us in Mark 6, in this verse that we just read, that he couldn't do miracles when he wasn't honored. But the flip side of that is that he could do miracles where he was treated with honor and with respect. And again, I just want to challenge us as individuals and as a church. Man, we want to lift up, we want to honor God. We want to give him that rightful place in our individual lives and in our church so that he can be freer to do deeper works in our lives. And we can see more breakthroughs, and we can see greater outreach here at Church of the Cross as we honor God. When you honor something, you benefit from it. When you dishonor, you're not going to receive anything from it. I can't tell you how many times I've had people come up to me at the end of the service and just say, man, Pastor, you're just talking to me directly, man. It was just like you and me, just one-on-one in a room. I had a breakthrough, or, man, I really connected the dots today. Can I tell you what's happening? Here's the deal. You're coming with an open heart. You're coming honoring God, and you're honoring whoever's bringing the word that morning. And guess what? God is meeting you as a result of your attitude. And if you don't get anything else, get this today. The level of honor you give is the level of honor that you will receive. I'll say that again. The level of honor you give is the level of honor you receive. the attitude you have towards others will determine what you're going to receive from it. If we had a guest speaker next week come in, and you're kind of looking at him, kind of sizing him up, and kind of just, I don't know about this dude, you're not going to receive anything from him. But if you come with an open heart and you honor God, you honor that person bringing the word, God's going to meet you right there. Here's the third thing. Honoring is decided, not deserved. It is decided. It's decided in our heart. You can't give honor to only those you think deserve honor. You have to make a decision in your heart to honor. And folks, just going to be very real with you. You're going to have honor tests throughout your life. You're going to have honor tests throughout your life, man. And I know I shared this here about a year or so ago, but it's just appropriate for this message. Years ago, after my wife and I came back from Bible college, I was working full-time in construction. I had a part-time window washing business. We were attending here at the church. They asked me to do youth ministry here on a volunteer basis, so I'm pouring my life into youth ministry. They were in the middle of a building project. That whole back of the church was being built, the oasis and all that. They couldn't afford to put on a youth pastor, so they asked me just to help out. So I'm helping out. Youth ministry is going tremendous. The senior pastor's son at the time was a missionary and would smuggle Bibles into China. He moved to the area. And they immediately put him on staff as the part-time youth director. And I'll tell you, man, that did not set right with me. Nobody knew that. But, man, in my mind, man, in my heart, I'm struggling. I'm going to God and say, what am I, chump change? What's going on? And God so clearly spoke to me. Have you ever heard God speak to you? And it's like louder than a voice. And he spoke to me. He asked me this question, are you there to minister to teenagers, or are you there for a title? And I said, I'm there to minister to teenagers. He said, well, just serve faithfully. And I just came along this guy, I just honored him. I just blessed him. I worked hard, and I had a good attitude. And do you know, within a couple months, he wound up sitting down with his dad. He wound up meeting with the elders and said, I want to tell you something. You guys got the wrong guy. You guys need to bring this guy on full time. You're taking advantage of him. You need to bring him on full time. And I tell you that not to brag on myself, what a wonderful guy, because plenty of times I've blown it. But I want to tell you, in that incident, I honored that man, I honored God, and God honored me. See, that was an honor test that God gave me. I wouldn't be here today if I would not have passed that test. I'll give you another example. When we were in Bible college, we lived in these apartment complexes. And the guy directly next to me, man, I would see the guy every day. When I was leaving for school, he was leaving for work. And you guys know me, I'm Mr. Chatty, okay? I could talk to anybody. This guy would not give me the time of day. He would not even acknowledge me. Hey, how's it going? He wouldn't even look over at me. He wouldn't even nod. He wouldn't even give me a dirty look. He would just pretend like he was deaf and dumb and just go into his apartment. I found out later, it's really kind of a redneck area. And I'm half Spanish and half Greek. I heard later that he's prejudiced against me. So anyway, this is what happened. We moved in the summer. And this is Christmas time, so how many months is that? I'm not really that smart. 6 months or so. This guy is giving me the cold shoulder. And I've taken it on as a challenge. I refuse to be offended by this guy. So at Christmas time, my wife is baking all these cookies. And I said, I want you to get your nicest platter out. And I want you to put on the best cookies. You know how some cookies are better than others at Christmas time, right? I said, let's give him the best we have. And we stacked that sucker high, man. We put, the foil over it. I went over and knocked on the door, and there was no window, so he had to open it. He opened it, and I just shoved it in. I'm sure he thought I was going to pop them. He probably thought I had enough of them. I was just going to come over and pop them. But I shoved it in and said, Merry Christmas. He didn't say a word. He just closed the door. But do you know, from that moment on, he became my friend. From that moment on, he became Mr. Chatty. He was a mechanic. He wanted to change my oil. He wanted to do anything for me. And I just say that because all through your life, you're going to have decisions to make. You could either get offended, or you can have the mind of Christ towards that person and say, you know what, Jesus died for that person. And, begin to honor and ask God for a strategy on how to reach them. And when you do, when you're doing that, you're honoring God. We're getting ready to take communion here in a few moments. And I just want to say this as we prepare our hearts for communion. All true honor is born out of a heart surrendered to the King of Kings. Psalms 22 verse 23 says, "You who fear the Lord, praise him. All you descendants of Jacob, honor him. Revere him, all you descendants of Israel." Too often the problem is we are treating God as ordinary. We are treating him as common. We're too familiar. And what do I mean by that? How many times do you hear people say, well, he's the big man upstairs, or he's the big man, or Jesus is my homeboy? Can I tell you something? Jesus is not my homeboy. Okay, Jesus is not a baby in the manger. He is the soon coming, returning king. He's the King of kings, and he is the Lord of lords. And when he comes back, he's coming with a sword. He's the righteous one. He's the one who shed his blood so that you and I may live. And when we begin to treat God in that honorable position, when we give him the honor and respect due, you know what? We will not be able to help but to let it be an outflow of our lives towards other people. And we'll begin to honor them when, in a fashion that would be honorable to God. See, you and I are not common or ordinary. For those of us that have crossed that line, we've given our lives to Jesus Christ. I want to tell you, we are not common or ordinary. Why? Because we have Jesus' name written across our hearts. I'm going to tell you a story, true story. I'm sure we're all familiar with Babe Ruth, greatest baseball player in the history of the sport. I don't know if you guys remember, if you ever watched the movie, I'm a kind of baseball buff, man. If you remember, there's one point in his career where he just pointed over, to out to the outfield. And his next pitch, he launches a home run. Man, it's like a holy moment of baseball, But this is a true story. There was actually 7 home run bats that were autographed by Babe Ruth. And the very first one was lost for decades. And what had happened is they had this batting contest, and Babe Ruth signed his bat that he was using in that batting contest, or the home run derby, and his agent gave it to a spectator there. But nobody got the spectator's name, and the guy just kind of disappeared out of sight, and nobody knew whatever happened to the bat. And what this guy actually did was he just took it, and it became his most valuable possession, and so he just kept it in a safe place. On his deathbed, it turned out he outlived all of his family. And so he decided to give this bat to his nurse that's come alongside and helped him for many, many years. So he gives it to this nurse. This nurse is not a big baseball fan, so she really doesn't know what she has. She knows it's valuable only because she knows the guy she was taking care of had said it was valuable. So she hit some hard times, and she decided that she wants to open up her own restaurant. So she takes the bat out from underneath her bed, which was there for 18 years. She takes the bat out from underneath her bed, takes it to this sports store, and says, hey, man, what's this bat worth? And the guy's eyes just got really big. Unfortunately, he was an honest guy, and he called some experts in. Fast forward, make a long story short, in 2006, this bat went on auction, and it received $1.3 million. So this lady got to open up her restaurant. But here's the cool part of the story. She winds up starting a foundation to serve the children that Babe Ruth wanted to serve at the end of his life. It's a cool story. Because for those of you that do not know baseball, okay, or maybe know the story of Babe Ruth, he had a very huge heart for kids. So when he would go into even visiting, his opponents' cities, he played for the New York Yankees. So when he would come to play in Cleveland, to play the Cleveland Indians, he would go to the children's hospitals and visit the kids there in cancer wards and different wards where the kids were really virtually dying. And he would do that. So when a reporter asked her, why did you put that money into a foundation to help others? She said, that bat was only valuable because Babe Ruth's name was on it. So the only reasonable thing I could do was something that would honor his life because he made it valuable. And I want to tell you today, you are valuable because of what Jesus did. And if you've crossed that line, you've received him in your life, the only right response is to do something with our lives to honor him. Sadly, for many people today, Isaiah 29:13 can tend to describe them. These people come near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart are far from me. And I want to challenge us, church, not to be a church that gives God lip service, not to be an individual that gives God lip service, but we give him true heartfelt honor because he is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And my true belief is when we really realize who we are because of what he did, then you know what? We will begin to value others and show honor to them because they are valuable enough because Jesus Christ died for them as well. And we'll see people through different eyes when we really understand who God is and what he's done in our lives. Let's just bow our heads before we take communion.